open a public hearing on the Vista Sand. I would ask Cleo to indicate to us
the second applicant, going back to the public hearing notice, the second applicant, Vista Sand, RJ Holdings LLC, 3549 Monroe Highway, Granbury, Texas, 76049, has requested a rezone from agriculture residential A3 to industrial to allow development of a sand transload facility. The parcel is described as being in part of the southeast one quarter of the northwest one quarter, part of the southwest one quarter of the northwest one quarter, and part of the northeast one quarter of the southwest one quarter, lying northerly of the railroad right-of-way, accepting volume 641, page 171 of record, computer number 016-1080-03-000, and part of the southwest one quarter of the northeast one quarter, computer number 016-1079-04-000, part of the northwest one quarter of the southeast one quarter, lying north of the railroad, computer number 016-1080-08-000, part of the south one half of the southeast one quarter of the northeast one quarter, computer number 016-1079-06-000, part of the northeast one quarter of the southeast one quarter, accepting the railroad right-of-way, computer number 016-1080-07-000, and part of the southeast one quarter of the southeast one quarter, accepting the railroad right-of-way, computer number 016-1081-03-000, all in section 6, count 28 north, range 13 west, town of Menominee, Dunn County, Wisconsin. And again, I will attest that was published in the paper on August 8th and August 15th.
Okay, thank you for your efforts. We do have a properly noticed meeting.
Yes, we do. All right. We have a little bit of technical difficulty here, so I'm going to try and get zoomed up in the right area here.
While Cleo is doing that, I would encourage anybody that has just recently come in and would like to address the committee to stop at the table over here, fill out a simple public hearing registration slip, and you will be called upon at the appropriate time to provide the committee your comments.
All right. This is just a tad part of it, but I think that's the general area here that we're looking at. Again, the town of Menominee had submitted their letters of support. You have letters before you that had been received in the office and photocopied for your information. I do have several other letters that were just submitted to us, and I will get them photocopied for you for your information prior to making your decision today.
So the copies of the letters that came in today are hard copy?
These are hard copies, and I just received them prior.
Would you please see that the committee gets them? I think you can maybe distribute them either through our mailboxes.
Correct.
Or, yeah, you'll give them to us.
Okay. I just received an email from the DNR, and they basically have no opposition to it, other than they that people aware of shoreline issues that may arise on the property because of an intermittent stream and so forth. But otherwise, it was a formality on their part.
Now, an intermittent stream doesn't deal with shoreline ordinances.
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay.
So, having said that, I believe the applicants are here and are prepared to present their request.
Thank you. We do have with us Mr. R.J. Sikes.
Yes.
And Luke, your last name?
Afterwards.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Would you care to inform the committee of what your proposal might look like? And again, while they are setting up and distributing some material to us, the public will have an opportunity at the close of their presentation to make comments either pro or con on the rezone proposal. I'll be calling upon people later, probably at random, so that we don't hear you know, a bunch of people for, and then lots of people against, and our eyes start to glaze over. So we don't want that to happen. So with that in mind, if anybody does want to address the committee, we do ask that you fill out a public hearing request slip, and that can be found at the table over here. And then Laura will get them to the chair at an appropriate time.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Walker.
this gentleman showed me a piece of packet material. I think we all have this, do we not?
I do recognize.
Okay,
that.
I told him that.
If anyone needs a copy, I have plenty of
That's
access
fine.
here.
I didn't want to lie to him too much.
Lying is not a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for having us today and allowing us the opportunity to present our request. My name is R.J. Sikes. I am the operating partner for Vista Sand. We are asking for a rezone today, approximately 188 acres, along 12, next to 330th, so that we can put in a transload facility, a unit train capable facility in Dunn County, along the Union Pacific line. There are no parcels currently zoned that would allow a unit train facility. There's a few zoned heavy industrial, but unfortunately they're either not for sale or not large enough, or both. In most cases, both. I'm unaware of any parcel large enough to accommodate a unit train facility, accommodating a loop track that would accommodate unit trains. The reason a loop track is so important is because you don't have to disconnect and reconnect all your cars, saving a lot of money and time and energy. And that's typically the way the railroad is moving forward. They're asking that groups design loop track, a lot more expensive, but design loop tracks so that they don't have to break cars apart. It's very noisy, it takes a lot of time reconnecting those cars, and it creates damage on the cars going forward. So a little bit about us. Vista Sand was incorporated in 2003 under a different name. It was then changed name in 2008, and then again in 2010 to Vista Sand. My partners and I purchased the business in April 2011, and took the facility, improved the facility, still improving the facility now. Previous to purchasing Vista Sand, my partners and I have been involved in the transportation side of the business. We have a company called Malt Transport. We do logistical services primarily for the large oil and gas companies, facilitating moving sand, transloading and moving sand, predominantly in Oklahoma, Texas, a little bit in Louisiana, a little bit in New Mexico. We have 13, I think we're up to 14 now, 14 transload facilities in Texas and Oklahoma. Some of them are existing grain elevators, so you probably recognize them. In Texas, some of the grain elevators are obsolete. We've gone in, purchased those, re-equipped those, retooled those, so that instead of moving grain, we now move sand through those facilities. We started the business in 2005, so we've been in the logistical side of the business since 2005, about 5.5 years before we ended up buying or actually own our own mine. Since owning the mine, we've almost tripled the capacity. Since 2011, we've installed new plant, several new plants on the property to increase our capacity, as well as bring on a larger customer base, more diverse customer base, going forward. Why are we here? If we have all this sand in Texas, why are we here? We're here because in Wisconsin, you have a much coarser sand, a stronger sand than we have in Texas. Our deposits in Texas are predominantly on the finer side. We have a very little bit, of course, but predominantly finer, which is primarily used in the natural gas side of the business. So there's kind of you can either go drill for oil, or what we call liquids, which would be your condensates and your oils, or you can drill for natural gas. A lot of these shale plays, it's a combination, because you're going to get some liquids, some gases. Therefore, they need the mixture of the sand types. Currently, as we serve our customer base today, we provide a lot of the finer sands, but then are dependent upon other companies, some in Wisconsin, some other places, to then rail the coarser material from up here to us. It's a very inefficient process. Going through the system, it takes a long time. It's very costly. Our goal is to streamline that process going forward. We're currently constructing a new facility on rail that has unit train capability of accepting unit trains, with the idea that we would load unit trains here, what we're going to call wet sand. Wet sand is sand that's in that 5 to 7% moisture. Sand that's been washed, it's been sized, but it has not been dried in any way. It's primarily just going through your washing machine, basically. It goes through a system to where it's spun around, then based on the weight, it goes through what we call a hydrosizer. The coarser sand flows to the bottom and out. The finer sands float off the top. The coarser sands are then allowed to naturally dry, 2-3 days. Once that happens, the sand goes from in that 20% moisture to somewhere in that 5 to 6% moisture. From there, our goal would be to put it on a truck and bring it to the site, load it in a rail car, and then ship it to Texas. So we're not asking for any, on this site, we're not asking to do any washing, any drying. This site is a straight, bring the sand in, store it long enough that we can build enough so where we can load in a unit train. A unit train, by definition, UP, is anything over 90 cars. They have asked, however, that we put in a unit train loop track capable of supporting 130. In our case, it supports roughly 132 to 133 cars. And that is assuming 4 engines, 4 UP engines. Kind of go back a little bit. So it's kind of the plan. The plan is for us to have finer sands that are naturally existing in Texas to process and dry those there, and bring in from a deposit here, bring in, rail the coarser material to our facility in Texas, or one of several facilities in Texas, and then dry that sand there, and then load it in a truck and take it to location going forward. And if y'all have any questions during this process, please, I know we're kind of jumping here and moving through the process. If you have any questions, please let me know. So what would the site look like going forward? It is on the UP. Railroad's been there, I think since 1800s, according to the guys at UP, maybe slightly thereafter, but I think it's in the late 1800s. Again, our goal is to take this 188-acre tract and convert it into a loop track system. Loop track, most of the trains would come in from Minneapolis, St. Paul direction. They would come in, be loaded, and then they would leave the same direction they came out. So most of your rail traffic will happen on K, not on 330. The way that we propose the loading,
you have a site plan. There's site plans I think in front of you as well if you'd like to follow along.
the way that we would propose loading the sand is a little different than probably anything you've seen here. We would like to bring the sand in via truck, and would then drop into a basically elevate. Trucks would either go up a little bit on an elevated scale or drop straight into a pit. From the pit, we then hit a telestacker, conveyor telestacker that would stack sand on top of one of our tunnels, which would then allow us to control electronically our gates, drop sand on conveyors, and load rail cars. It does several things for us. A, it makes it a lot faster. B, it makes it a lot quieter. Most of all your operating equipment is basically under a mound of sand, so you don't hear a whole lot. Number 3, it allows us to be a lot more accurate in our loading of our rail cars because we can use belt scales and scales to make sure, through an automated process with a little bit of fine tuning, that we are fairly consistent in our loading going forward. Yes, ma'am.
You've got some photos there. Can you step us through what you've been telling us,
Sure.
point by point, indicating the photos?
Sure. So I think the best one would be, I'm going to borrow this one here. So the best trucks would enter somewhere off 330th, which we've entered a development agreement with the town of Menominee to upgrade this road, this crossing, upgrade this road to our entrance here. Trucks would come in. Once they came in, there would be, as you can see, the truck they have depicted here is like a grain bottom drop car. We would either use bottom drops or end dumps. So like basically a large dump truck comes in and dumps it. Sand would fall into a pit here, then hit a conveyor here, which would telestack within the stack of sand on top of a tunnel system. The tunnel system looks.
The telestacker is on this picture too.
So this is what a telestacker looks like. It extends up, it allows you to back it in, forward up, it allows you to stack large amounts of sand and make it taller, make it more of a comprised box. So it would hit this telestacker and then be stacked on top of the tunnel. This is what the top looks like. Once sand gets on it, you can't really see it, but this is what the top of the tunnel looks like. The tunnel has these gates on top. There's like, in this case, probably as many as 12. 12 gates, and you set them off maybe as much as every 30 or 40 feet from each other. What that allows you to do is you can see on the inside, here's what these gates look like in here. And what that allows us to do is there's a slide gate in here, plain moves, that allow us to, when we're ready, electronically, we move this spout here over the conveyor, and then open this gate, and the sand falls right on that conveyor. From that conveyor, the sand then goes out the tunnel, up into what we call a transfer hopper. The transfer hopper allows us to make sure that we have the right weight going into the rail car. The rail car pulls under, the sand drops in, next rail car moves forward, and continue the process going forward. It allows really, really fast loading so that you don't have to have a loader sitting there and trying to figure out, well, do I need 3 buckets, do I need 4 buckets, do I need 4.5 buckets? So as it works through the system, this is kind of sand on top of the tunnel. You can kind of see the transfer conveyor stacking the sand on top. Here's your tunnel, sand's on top, and then as you open these gates, sand inside drops down, hits the conveyor, and then into a rail car.
So there's never wet sand on top? So
No,
it's drawn from below?
Yeah, you draw it from the center of the stack, basically. What that allows you to do is to keep, it allows the sand, does several things. As the sand comes in via truck here, that is wetter sand. It's sand, in that 6-7% moisture. As it sits here, the sand naturally, it's like a big French drain system, right? You've got this big tunnel, so the water naturally just flows into that tunnel, reducing the moisture maybe as much as 4 to 5%. From there, you're pulling some of the driest sand. When you open those gates, you're pulling the driest sand. So even if it rains, it's not like when it rains, it's not like the water is going to filter through the sand. What ends up happening is it hits the sand and then runs off the side. It doesn't flow into the natural to the bottom. So even if it rains or snows or whatever, you're still bringing some of the driest sand because you're pulling from basically close sand.
But even that dry sand still has a moisture content of what, roughly 5-6%.
Somewhere between 4 and 6%. And it varies. I mean, it's you could have the same stack of sand, and some of it come in at 4%, some of it come in at 6%, just from how long it sat there, different characteristics of the sand. No problem.
Yeah, I would have a question. Your site plan shows us a water holding tank, but yet, what you're saying is that the sand sheds the water and goes into that holding pond. Is that going to be large enough, or do you have to do the engineering on that yet?
We've done a lot of engineering. Quite honestly, the amount of water that's coming off here is not that much. You'd be really surprised. It's not. you're talking about very little water. And what happens is these tunnels are slanted, so you're channeling the water wherever you want. In this case, it would be channeled, it'll be slightly elevated, headed this way. So, we want the drier sand to be in the rail car, so that's going to be a little bit slightly higher elevation. And we're talking like grade 2 or 3%, just enough to allow the water to run out the backside of this tunnel, into a pond. We put the pond there in case we need it for stormwater or anything else. From a typical standpoint of just having the tunnel there, you really need it.
And I think the direct answer is yes. The SEH is the engineering firm that we've been using, and have been working on stormwater retention with the DNR and different regulatory bodies that would govern the size of the holding pond.
And we'll comply with all those regulations. Just to be very honest, part of the other reason of having the pond there is we've agreed with the town of Menominee through a development agreement that if dust became an issue, that we would then potentially some sort of sprinkler type system, and if so, we would need some sort of pond to recirculate that water for some sort of dust control. So through a development agreement with the town of Menominee on an ongoing basis, we've agreed to sit down and kind of work through any potential issues as they come up going forward, which would be another reason to have the pond there aesthetically, also to potentially use for dust control. We've, just a quick tidbit, may not matter, but we've worked with Trinity on a rail car. It is specifically designed for our purposes. It's basically a combination of a car that's currently being used in the grain industry and aggregates, and also kind of the top of what's currently being used as a hopper for more dried products, a hopper car. So it's kind of a combination between while it is a gondola car, it does have a lot of characteristics of a natural hopper. What I mean by that, in this case, these have 4 doors at the bottom, which doesn't really matter up here, but in Texas, it allows us to unload fast. What this does is they're air actuators, so they run off the train air. Automatically, we can open the car doors and the sand drop through. On the flip side, making this more like a hopper car, we have engineered kind of a dome top cover that will be made either out of fiberglass or metal, some sort of steel, depending on what the engineers come back with. They're currently finalizing the drawings now based on weight and what they will hold. It is more of a kind of a dome type cover that will serve 2 purposes. Primarily, it allows us to load to the exact weight of what we need and not run into trouble with if it rains, it snows, or anything else, and these cars become overloaded, because they are watertight. So if we get water in there, it's just going to add to the weight of that car going forward. We don't want those cars pulled out, have to pay big money to get them back in the system, or have some other guy load them going forward. And then 2, for dust control. I know we've all seen them, unit trains or trains run down the road, it looks like a sandstorm, because they've got the sand too dry and they're running 70 miles an hour down the road, down the railroad. It happens. This track is rated for 70 miles an hour. So I don't know if the UP currently runs at 70 miles an hour, but that's what they told us, is it is rated for 70 miles an hour. With that being said, that was one of the reasons that we had to cover top to make sure that we weren't the guys. We weren't the guys that had to stand storm, going down the rail.
President.
Yeah, it's about the design of the car, and I understand it's still in the design phase, but you drop the sand in and you take the cover off. You put the cover on. How is it possible to hold it down and put the cover on?
Sure.
Okay.
So so the car is operated on air. So it's an air actuated car. So the way that we have it designed now is there's a center partition. So there's 2 compartments in each car. That way you don't overload any one axle, because that's important for the rail for the railroad going down correct. These covers have basically grain tops. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're in some of the trucks. There's a technology. They have a long port at the top. In our case, it's a 30-inch by like 8 feet. So it's like 30 inches out by like 8 feet long. What that allows us to do is it's the same type of deal. It's an air actuated cover or an open lid on the top. So you have this top, comes over, and down the center, right down the center of the rail car, about a 30-inch opening, you have an air actuator. So based on the train air, this thing just lifts up and scoots over. That's what the lid does. It's an automated process. So you can open the lid, it doesn't flip over or anything like that. It lifts up slightly and just rotates over, which then leaves you a 30-inch window, 8 feet long, for that car to fall under this transfer hopper. Drop the sand in. You got to move the car slightly to get all the sand in there. You can move it, but based on the angle of repose, which is basically how that sand flows in there and drops, that's the height of this transfer hopper. So that's the reason it's really important. From an engineering standpoint, our engineers have designed this so that based on that height, you stay within that 30 inches, but then still the sand flows out, still allows to fill that compartment and not just fill up. Does that kind of make sense? Because if you just have a telestacker, you're going to have this, right? You're going to start just building into the cone.
I was more concerned about the lid.
So by having the air actuator, it does several things for us. We don't have to have a guy, we don't have to put a safety. We will have safety racks, but you won't have to put a guy up here to open every top. It's very heavy and could be dangerous. Just from a standpoint, if we have a guy up here flipping the lids, that's how it's standardly done now. If you go to some of these other companies and they're loading dry sand and everything else, there's no automation. It's all unhitch it, open the lid, fill it up, another guy gets back on top, and latches it down. Part of the reason that we're still trying to figure out if we can do it with fiberglass, because it weighs a lot less, is whether that system, the lid opening system, will support, will fiberglass support the lid opening system will weight. Otherwise, it won't. It has to be steel.
And so the car itself is engineered specifically to ship this type of product. And it was tweaked and modified a bit. It's just the top that they're still
Constantly tweaked.
Yeah, and the top isn't finalized, but this part of the car itself is engineered.
The top is finalized. The pieces they're still working on is the components, the air actuated opening. This is nobody else is doing this. So from making sure that, for example, last week we set a meeting that we're actually putting canisters, air basically canister on every car to make sure that the cars in the middle have enough PSI in it to actually lift that lid in the middle. Enough pressure in enough air pressure in that actually. Once you get away from the train air, about 40 cars, you start getting pressure. So if you have 130 cars, 40 cars out, 40 through 80. The cars with the number 40 through 80 intensity don't have the pressure. So what we've done is we put an actual canister, basically just like a straight air compressor on every single car. So the train fills those canisters up to guarantee that there's enough pressure that it will shut. And as well as open the lock.
And they'll be shut immediately or soon after being loaded.
These cars will come through, we may have 2 or 3 or 4 open at a time, follow through, 2 or 3 or 4 close, as it goes through the process. This also ensures that if, for whatever reason, there is a mistake, we don't actually get the lids closed, we don't tear them off on a bridge going down the road, you understand that. We're asking for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, primarily because that's what the railroad dictates. Railroad dictates on unit trains that are not scheduled, but maybe more than 14 or 16 hours out. So they'll give you notification, say your train's going to arrive, 2 p.m. on Sunday. So from when it arrives, based on the unit train rules with the railroad, you have 24 hours tops. So you have to have that car in, loaded, and serviced on the way out. Well, there's one catch. 24 hours includes about 4 to 6 hours for the railroad to check all the cars and make sure that, so once it's been loaded, they get 4 to 6 hours to check to make sure that all the cars are in compliance with the federal regulations and make sure there's no issues with any of the air on any of the other train or any part of the train. So really that limits you to about 16 to 18 hours of actual loading time without having to pay penalties and fees. And it gets really complicated at that point with the UP power coming through. So we are asking for 24/7. We anticipate that it'll be roughly 8 months out of the year, kind of in December, January, February, March timeframe. Historically, sometime around mid-December is roughly when, at least in my limited experience the last couple of years, mid-December has been kind of the last time to be able to really ship sand. And then that kind of starts up sometime right after the road bans, sometime in April, May timeframe. So most of our activities will be kind of in April going forward to December timeframe. Kind of the rule of thumb is once it gets below freezing consistently, it may go below freezing at night, but if it stays below freezing during the day, for more than 3 or 4 days at a time, that's when you shut your operation down just because of the moisture in your wet plants where you're getting your sand causes your belts to freeze up, mess up, creates all sorts of problems. So that's kind of the rule of thumb. We anticipate our goal is to move roughly 1 million tons of sand. 1 million tons of sand. The unit train holds roughly, each car holds roughly 100 tons. And so if you kind of do the math, that's 2 to 4 unit trains a week depending on when the railroad schedules will come in and out, which varies between how long it takes us to unload them, how far they have to go, and then any inspections or anything that they have to do to pull them off, vary by a day or 2. Historically, from the stuff that the UP is telling us, it takes between 7.5 and 9 days for a train to leave this facility, go to Texas, be unloaded, and come back. So if it left on Monday, it could be back, Monday evening, Tuesday, or Wednesday the following week. It's kind of a little bit of variance. Earlier we talked about the different.
Supervisor Bjork. Would there be like the 2-unit trains, like a 240 or 200 cars, or is it just that 1-unit train that you have to wait till it comes back to load again? Or do you have like another one that's en route while one's going back down?
We have 500 cars, so it'll be roughly 4 unit trains. So if they all hit 1 week, that could be your 4th 1 week. Historically, though, it'll be spread out to where I would say about every 10 days, every 9 to 10 days we get fares. We don't want to hit all the same week because that really creates problems with just getting the same site. If we have 12,000, roughly 12,000 tons of storage here, it kind of makes it a little bit dicey if you start getting all these nutrients, back up. 12 to 15,000 tons here, it really gets dicey going forward.
But part of the reason why there are additional, you see in the site plan, there's additional, lines in there is to be able to facilitate in the event that there is a couple unit trains on site at one time.
So it's actually 2 tracks with the potential of a 3rd track. So we can only load 1 at a time. But if per the UP, per the class, when you say class 1 railroad, it's not just the UP, you have to be able to put the car somewhere. You can't just leave them out on the main line. So if they did come, you have to stack them in there. Try to get it out as fast as we can.
Supervisor Bjork, follow us? Supervisor Wall.
One question before you leave the cars. You talked about the tweaking that's going on and the engineering that's going on. What happens if it doesn't work?
Well, worst case scenario is we have to manually open just the top of the 30-inch by 90 foot
So in other words, there's no doubt that the top and the port are going to work.
Yes, sir.
Whether they're fiberglass or steel, under either circumstance, they'll work.
Yes, sir.
The only issue, technical issue, is the air opening and closing, the automatic opening and closing.
Yes, sir. And that's just, like I said, that's a smaller, you have your cover that bolts down, and then you just have that small opening, right, what we're gonna call the grain top. It's commonly used in the grain. The grain top is the one that is still, you know, originally they had suggested just to flop over and flop back. It was taking a lot of horsepower to make sure that thing was gonna wham, slam down, from a noise standpoint and from wear and tear on the cars. We said that's not gonna work. That's not gonna be unacceptable. When it went from, you know, about 18 inches to 30 inches, and that came from the engineering group that said, hey, we need a bigger opening here on this rail car so that it has to be perfect. So when that thing grew to 30 inches, that's what this is. This type slam down is not gonna work, so it has to be kind of lift up, screwed over.
I have one other question.
Please.
Tell me again how many tons of sand each one of these gondola cars hold?
5 or 10% within 100 tons. So between 100 and 105 tons. And really that will ultimately depend on exactly how much this cover is. Right now, if everything is perfect, we will 100 without the cover, you will 110 tons. But the cover already we know weighs between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds. And with the extra components, you're probably looking, let's just say 6,000 pounds. 3 times. So you got it down to like between 105 and 107. You're not going to get that exact. So you're going to be somewhere in 100, between 100 and 105.
So if my math is correct, and it may not be, I believe you said that those piles or whatever you call them, covering the tunnels, around 12 to 15 altitude. So when you load a unit train of 120 cars, you've exhausted those piles, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, it'll be a constant process of trucks coming in. And even while we're loading here, trucks will still be coming in and piling sand up on top. So it'll be a constant process. The idea too is you can build more storage there, but that's just bigger piles, bigger, we were trying to eliminate that.
Yeah, how many truckloads are used to load a single car?
So for each rail car, it takes about 4 trucks.
About
Yes, ma'am. It's between 23 and a half and 26 tons is what a typical truck without the overland permit. It's about 24 to 29 tons. 25 is kind of what we shoot. While we're on trucks, we've also agreed with the town of Menominee to bring on a CNG fleet. It does a lot of things today, supports our industry. It's natural gas, it's cleaner, it's quieter, and after you get over the sticker shock, it's more efficient. These are very, very expensive compared to your normal vehicles. So, side by side, normal Class 7, Class 8 vehicle, which is your 18-wheelers, versus one that runs on what we're going to say CNG. There's several different types of natural gas fuels. There's LNG and CNG. In our case, we use CNG, which is compressed natural gas, as opposed to LNG, which is LNG has to be cooled, stored in a cooler. The advantage of LNG is that you can get more fuel on a truck to get a longer range. In our case, because we're in a closed loop, the 400 to 450 miles that you can get between refuelings is sufficient for our operation. So we're proposing CNG trucks. Our trucks will be equipped with the same technology we have now, which allows us to do GPS monitoring, allows us from a safety perspective. We have all the technology to literally, we can point that truck, every pinpoint along the route, tell you exactly how fast it is going, if they stop, for how long, things exactly where they stop within about 2-3 feet. We have recording devices on there that record not only accidents but near misses, anything that the truck does differently. If the wheel comes off the ground and the brakes are applied too aggressively, it automatically records the previous 12 seconds before and 15 seconds after on a continual basis. So from a technology standpoint, the trucking side, we believe that we far outpace the industry, even our industry, our existing industry, but basically trucking companies across the country. We do that now for our current customers. They love it. Our accidents have gone way down from a standpoint we don't have any compared to a lot of our competitors who have quite a few. So it's a good tool, and we use that same tool here. I know there's a lot of concern in several different townships about how you can police this. Trucks seem to be a major point of contention of, you've got all this truck traffic, these guys are going to be hauling through town, destroying everything. Well, we're hiring local guys, we're hiring your neighbors, and we will have some safeguards on that as well, so that if these guys go over the posted speed limit at any time for any reason, it automatically generates an email and sends it to the supervisor. After 3 times of that, that's it.
And I think when the trucking first, or when this whole project kicked off, whenever it was 6-8 months ago, the idea was to maybe third party the trucking side of things. But through the feedback with all the different meetings at with the town of Menominee, one of the major concerns, like RG was mentioning, the trucking side of the business kept getting brought up. So instead of third partying it, Vista Sand decided to be a little bit more hands-on. They run mulch trucking and Boeing operated that for an extended period of time, so they're going to implement those industry best practices over into this operation up here and just run it, incorporate it as part of the whole plan for up here, as opposed to third party where there's not as much control and regulation on that part of it.
And one of the main reasons we do it too, A, for safety, but B, for our insurance. For trucking companies, insurance, that's like pretty difficult to keep a reasonable premium. You can get insurance, it's just how much it costs you. So by having all these additional features, we can break because obviously we have less accidents, less downtime, less issues. We have a very, very aggressive maintenance program. As you get scored, when you're stopped, you're scored based on several different things, and one of them is like driver fatigue, one of them is driver fitness, how well your trucks are maintained, what your tires look like, you have all your bus flaps, you have all your lights, all your reflector stickers, all those things come into play. So we have a very, very aggressive maintenance to make sure that we have the highest and best scores when we are ready to get forward. I guess now would be a good time to talk about routes.
One question. On your route, where would the trucks be refueled?
On our route here, so this is just kind of proposed route, but there is on 128 right here to 94, there's a quick trip that we are working with that will be putting in CNG and I believe LNG, not just for us, but the whole community, anybody that would like to use it. I think they're primarily putting it in because we have guaranteed that we're going to take so much fuel from them, but it will be open to anybody in the public. Which, as a side note, I'll throw in a side note for the natural gas industry. After you get past the initial cost of putting in your converters and everything else to run off of a CNG or an LNG, it is about 40 to 45% cheaper to fuel a vehicle using CNG. For example, if that same gallon of diesel that gets me 6-7 miles down the road, I pay $3.50 or $4 for it. I can pay $1.40, $1.50 and get that same distance out of a CNG product. It's considerably cheaper. And that cost may start off, because they're repaying everything, may start off at $1.70, the $1.80 range, but they're still considerably cheaper going forward.
Mr. President, clear?
So let me be clear, they leave this route and then go down to the stations, then turn around and come back up.
Yes, ma'am. So that detour right there is about a mile and a half. So to the refueling
We
station.
figure they make fuel once a day, is that the idea?
Once a shift. So if the proposed route, and we are looking for guidance on the proposed route. The proposed route that stands now is leave our located proposed mining site, St. Clair County, take a right on G to 170 down to 79 to 12 into the site. On the way back, to make again another right-hand turn out on 12, up 120 back to the facility. That's about 35, 37 mile trip, taking that whole route. CNG can get roughly 450 miles before you refuel. So you have roughly 11, 12 trips.
I do have a question. In Wisconsin, our roads are funded through a gas tax and license fees and borrowing. Borrowing. The state borrows a lot of money for roads. CNG gas taxes.
It's actually more. It's a little bit more than you would ever use.
More BTU-wise or mileage-wise? Or
Well,
is that more
more or
based on
less.
apples to apples, not?
So basically, the way it works is they actually tax MMBTU or million cubic feet of gas, which is broken down to some of it. We all refer to it as MMBTU because that's our industry. That's a lot. Based on the tax, if you look at it kind of per gallon type basis equivalent, the tax on the CNG is higher than diesel. However, you're going to get more. So if you look at it this way, so if the same gallon of diesel, they put, let's just say 50-cent tax on that, versus the same equivalent of a gallon of diesel and CNG, and they put a 60-cent tax on it, just because there's more spread, more play. So it's actually slightly higher, along with everybody's taxing along the way. So you've got your Encore Interlow, it's not Encore anymore, it's Dun, Energy, everybody else, there's taxing along the way, adding their service fees as the natural gas flows through the pipeline to get to those guys. So
Those are federal taxes that you're talking about.
that I don't know. I just know.
I don't think
from a tax
that's
standpoint.
true for the state, but I'm not sure you're wrong for the state, but what you were talking about was federal gas tax.
And federal gas tax does not pay for Wisconsin highways. Excuse me, unless they send money back.
Well, it would be part of the 12 route, but not any of the other. The others are state highways. On this proposal.
the U.S., the others are state.
Yeah.
I can look into that.
That would be a huge concern. Supervisor Bjork.
So how long is this proposed route? How many miles?
I think it's 35, roughly 35 miles.
And from your proposed, mine location, how far is that from the Canadian Northern or Canadian National Railroad line?
There is some the railroad actually is just north of, it's kind of 170.
It's within a couple miles.
It is closer.
So
Unfortunately,
what's wrong with that rail line?
well, the CN got several issues. To support the type of operation that we want, they don't have the infrastructure yet. It's going to cost them about $30–40 million that they said they're going to put in. They've been saying they've been going to put it in for 18 months. They haven't gotten it. Number two is the CN is not kind of one of the primary railroads that heads south. They head kind of east and west and kind of back towards Canada. So to do a deal with the CN would require a deal with the KCS, Kansas City Southern, which is, I guess they're considered part of the Class 1 railroads, but they don't have a direct route. It's a convoluted routing system for them to get the cars to Texas and South Texas, where our destination site in South Texas is on the UP, and so it's considerably cheaper by almost like 30% to have an origin and a destination on the same railroad. So like the original UP and terminal UP. Our site in Crescent, Texas, we're on a short line, so we can take in BNSF, UP, or anybody, but you're still having to do the jerry-rigging around. And you're talking about like maybe as much as 4 to 5 days between the way they go. In discussions with the CN, they also, are talking about, maybe 50 car unit trains or 55 car unit trains, which also complicates things considerably just because of the infrastructure and the way they do it.
More questions?
So the proposed route that we have here, the reason we've chosen this is because it's all right-hand turns. And we have, exactly, so let's go back. We were asked to stay on state and federal highways, which we've done, or county highways, and minimize county highways. We've tried to do that with the exception of about a mile and a half here on County Road G, and a small amount here on 330th, which we've agreed to both upgrade the 330 section here and assist in the upgrade here with St. Clair County.
I'm asking you to stay off the county highways.
Just in a conversation with Wisconsin DOT and everything else from the standpoint of how they'd like to see the flow of traffic. And our understanding, talking to the regulatory agencies, is state highways and federal highways were built for commercial traffic. That's what we want. That's what we want to put on these highways in particular are vastly underutilized. Maybe as much as like 15 to 20% of their intended capacity. So, for example, if they were designed for 100 cars a day or 100 trucks a day, they're getting about 15 to 20. So there's a lot of capacity that could be absorbed by these highways.
Are you talking average peak utilization?
I'm just referring to what the Wisconsin DOT told us. They just said that,
I can follow up what those numbers and what the capacity of the roads are today, but depending on which stretch or what portion of the road you're on, I think it's an average of like 20% utilization between all vehicles on those roads, not truck specific or car specific, just vehicles in general, which is according to the DOT how they rate these roads, because they said that they build them the specifications to handle all types of vehicles, so long as you're under the weight threshold, of course. So then they just take capacity as to total vehicles on the road, not broken down into whether it's a car or a truck or semi or anything. And I'd be happy to follow up with those capacity numbers were, because to memory, I don't want to misquote it.
So this is kind of the proposed route. We're open to switching times at different parts of the day.
Maybe talk about how we've already agreed within the developers agreement to limit some of the hours of trucking and the days of trucking.
Yeah, so in the developers agreement, we agreed to, during school hours, to loading times and unloading times. I think there's roughly a 2-hour window in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, afternoon, that we've agreed to limit our truck traffic or no truck traffic during those time periods, unless of course there's emergency or something like that. And so, Saturday, we agreed to cease all operations, truck operations, Saturday at 8 p.m. and wouldn't recommence until Monday at 5 p.m.
Supervisor Quinn.
You mentioned the gas taxes, which Supervisor Walter pointed out are primarily federal oriented. Do you have an estimate of how much you'd be contributing to the state with regard to the licensing?
Yes, sir. We're going to have roughly 40 trucks, 35 to 40 trucks, based on the time period proposed, based on making it the most efficient operation. Have to do down to maintenance. Also, by the time you figure out your loading times, travel times, unloading times, back out, the figure all the logistics and all those pieces moving around. Getting more than about, 35 trucks running at any given time. You're waiting, somebody's waiting somewhere, which is something we don't want.
Supervisor Bjork?
So how many trucks would be going a day then? On an average day, how many like moves would you be making per hour or whatever?
That's a great question. I got to rerun those numbers. I ran them, but I've slept since then, so I apologize. But I think it's, I think we're assuming, I think it's around. How many trips? What was the question?
How many trucks per hour or per day would be on the road? Is it there?
If I understand it, you said 35 trucks are running 35-mile haul, it'd be 1 mile on the average. I mean, that would be my simple math.
I think based on the number of hours that you're limiting everything else, it's around 200 trucks a day. So it's around 200 truck loads. It's roughly around 200 trucks a day.
So then you only load 50 cars per day?
Well, yes, ma'am. I mean, the idea would be that you would put a move enough sand on your site with those 50 cars. So that you would constantly building up with it. You have all the sand on site, load it, and continue to fill it.
So that would be the average number, but you wouldn't do it that way. You do it when the trains are loaded, you load the train in that 16-hour window approximately. So you load all 100 to 120 cars, whatever that train is, in that 16-hour window. But if you were to average it out on a per day, that 50 number is approximately what it is.
I don't, I'm not sure I want to go into all this detail part of it. It's your job to manage this whole concept. But if you, in the development agreement, you restricted yourselves to 4 hours a day during school year. You restricted yourself on Saturday, I think it was at 4 o'clock until Monday morning at 8 o'clock or something like that. Now, UP calls you and says, we're going to have your unit train in there Saturday. And it's going to have 120 cars. We're going to have the second one there. Sunday morning, it's going to have 120 cars. What are you guys going to do?
I think we're going to have to, we're going to get probably $3,000 an hour for the downtime for us to get loaded. The idea would be we have 15,000 tons on site.
We talked about that in the go.
Historically, we would try to limit work with the UP and say, okay, you send us one, you got to give us a little bit of time. They understand the strength as well. We told them, listen, from a trucking standpoint, we had to give up some things, and that was part of it. There's pretty fluid conversation with you right now. The one thing they've said is you have to have 24 hours, 7 days a week to be able to load it. So we can work around, the train comes in on Sunday, no problem, we load it up. And we can work around the trucking aspect, with the multiple trains, but we're going to have a hard time. We bring the train at 8 p.m. and you're not going to be able to start loading until 8 a.m. or 7 a.m.
So you guys are just basically going to be consistent with 12 to 15,000 tons of sand on this site all the time, basically.
Yes.
Other than while you're unloading or.
So I mean, even as you're unloading, so even if the train comes in, that same day that you're unloading, let's say 10,000 tons goes out, you've got 5,000 tons coming back.
Thank you.
So I would think that if you're restricted from moving sand from the mine to that 8 or 9 month period of time, the more sand you had stockpile, that you could at least be shipping sand out, even though you don't have sand coming in. And then my real question would be then, why don't you then put 20 or 25,000 tons, or 50,000 tons in stockpile? What's to prevent that from happening? So that when, you're not using the highways, you're still loading trains.
Well, I mean, part of it's just the weather conditions in there. Because once it gets to a certain temperature, we're not gonna be able to run our, everything's based on the conveyor system. You've still got moisture in your sand. So during that 3 or 4 month period, it's gonna be very, very difficult without tearing up all your belts and all your pulleys and everything else, because as that sand gets hard, if any of that moisture were to freeze, and think that it's almost like rocks. You start putting rocks to your tail pulleys and everything else, you're gonna quickly burn up thousands and thousands of dollars. You'll do it naturally just with sand. So during normal conditions, you're really gonna tear it up, going forward. So it's more of a temperature, weather thing than it is, and that's just where we have to be smart. We know that we're going to try to move, 1 million tons a year, whether we move it in 7 months or 9 months, that's really what we have to do. And yes, the answer is you could put more storage on here. It complicates it dramatically on how that all sits on the site, flows, just from a standpoint of, the length of this tunnel. You could do it, yes. Is that in the plan? No. Something we really thought about now. Kind of just sitting here in our operations.
We have, we're transferring sand, and we have a proposed mine location, but not permitted.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Are there any other areas within the scope here that are permitted?
Vista Sand does not have any other, so we don't have any active permits.
So what are you looking at transferring?
Well, it's a twofold process. We're trying to permit our mine in St. Croix County and trying to permit our transfer facility in Dunn County.
When will you know about that, the St. Croix?
We submitted a permit. I'm a crook, so we submitted our permit. We sat down with St. Croix staff. They asked us that they wanted some additional information, but not predominantly more groundwater studies, more groundwater wells drilled to monitor that. So we pulled our permit, and we actually have a rig out there today putting down the wells, so we can start that monitoring process. And hopefully we'll be submitted by the end of September to start back into that process. And based on the information they asked us to do.
And they had asked us to just more or less, would you guys be willing to drill 5 additional wells, monitor the water, do a few other additional things? Archie said, yeah, just to get a little bit better baseline.
Okay, if that site is turned down, what happens to this?
And if that site's turned down, then we gotta go find another site. And we have to find a site fairly in close proximity to this site.
When do you expect to hear from the St. Croix?
I don't know. That's a good question. It could be 4 months. I mean, the idea was to hopefully start construction sometime in March. So, as soon as the temperature come up just a little bit, so sometime in March, we have to do a construction period, so we'd like to try to get permanent by then.
So it's clear, you approve that plan?
I think it's, sorry, I think it's roughly like 120 to 150 days when we submit our application to this after we get this well through.
Supervisor Walker has a question.
Assume for a minute that Vista is not successful, not making that either a hope or a prediction. Your company has been involved in the transportation side, not the mining side of this industry for the next number of years you talked about. Is there any possibility that that's what you'll end up doing up here? That this site will be, in essence, open for use by the mines in Chippewa County and Barron County and Eau Claire County and wherever there are mines that are not operated by Vista? The one across the street, for example.
Fairmont, that's a great question. The answer is it can be used for anything. It can be used for grain, sand. If we get into a situation where we lose it, somebody else can come in and buy it. It's a transloading site. It's not mine specific. We're not doing mining processing.
Right.
So it could be used for just about anything. I will say UP has put immense value on this project just from a standpoint. It's one of the very few projects that actually have a loop track there's just not many of those around right now. With the rail traffic increasing the way it is, they need more efficient ways to get volume through the system. Unit trains are definitely the way to go, in their opinion. So based on that, I think it could be. You got ideas? We're all in.
Somebody, we've been asked the question numerous times about potentially, shipping grain out of there, because we're all, farm communities, and graduates said, yeah, I mean, if it makes sense, is there some way to benefit the local, farm community by having some type of grain usage on it?
It's considerably cheaper from the manifest to the train rate. You're talking 20%. It's considerably cheaper. It takes a little bit more logistical planning to get that. Get you 90 to 100 cars, but what you have.
Do you folks negotiate some kind of a long-term license arrangement with UP?
Yes, sir. We are through the process of we assigned a memorandum of understanding, which basically dictates the terms that they provide us service. We agree to, abide by those terms of service.
Yeah.
There's a little negotiation, but there's not a whole lot. I mean, you're dealing with the UP. So we have agreed to that, and it also talks about the type of switches that are going to be there on the site. So it is fairly. It has moved fairly quickly through the UP process, and we have, most of the drawings engineered for, the crossing and the switch, the tracks, the way they're going to lay out on there. So that train is left to a degree on what and where they're at operation on the site.
We have documentation, a letter.
Well,
If
yeah.
you'd like to, see it, just indicating their support.
Mr. Chairman,
We
just
actually
for,
have that.
yeah, just for clarity, I don't think it's our province to get into that part of it. I'm just more curious about, we're talking about a mining overlay process as opposed to an industrial process. That has some significance for the county in a long-term, on a long-term basis. And particularly, it has an effect or an affect if you were to stop your operation after a certain time. And I'm just thinking about how this would work. If you have an agreement with the UP, 1 year, 100 years, whatever it might be, and that doesn't specify sand, it specifies commodities that are amenable to unit train loading and transporting. I mean, that's part of, I think, what we have to think about. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, again, I'm not predicting, I'm not expressing opinion. I just try to get that sort of information in my head.
To answer that a little bit, under the federal guidelines, UP has to provide your service. So if you have a product, you're going to move because they are a federal carrier and they fall under federal jurisdiction and everything else. They have right of eminent domain and everything else. They have to provide you service. Now they can make it really expensive, really difficult to do business there, but by law they have to. If you're on their railroad, they have to provide you service. We have a great relationship with them. So it is a very good working relationship. I would assume if we stepped out, it would be very similar. The fact that they want to move cars. That's their whole business. So their business plan is contingent upon moving cars. And with this facility, from my understanding of working with you would have guys lined up for you to try to do something here just because of the infrastructure. It's a considerable amount of infrastructure cost to put in. Along that same note, I would encourage you to maybe look at this differently than in the mining overlay district. The way that we're looking at it, that this is an industrial use, that is a transloading use. It could be sand, it could be widgets, it could be anything. We are not mining, we are not processing, we are not drying, we're doing, none of the activities that would be under a mining type ordinance other than transload. But you not only transload sand, you transload thousands of products every day. So put my 2 cents in, I would ask the committee look at this from a standpoint of is it an industrial site that is transit business. We just have to be the same.
Supervisor Cleary.
Okay, what you said was that the UP must provide access anywhere along the UP route, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Who owns this infrastructure that is being built right here? That belongs to whom?
Most of it will belong to Vista. Some of it belongs to UP. So like all the switching coming off within a certain distance, that all belongs to UP. And after a certain distance, it belongs to Vista. So it's kind of a twofold. Kind of last, probably most important is,
I've got a question that goes back to the transportation and the mining thing. But somewhere in your documentation, I read that a mine located south of Glenwood City, if you were to open that, would provide 40% of the capacity of your transport facility. Excuse me. That was a reminder to remind everybody to turn your cell phones on. Thank you, excuse me. So if that particular mine site provided 40% of your capacity for transporting product out, where would the other, well, you're never at 100%, but where would your other 60% come from?
okay, so where that number came from, we were pressed to ask, is 1 million tons all of the site can? If everything were perfectly, with UP and everything else. And the answer is no. The site would not be a capacity of 1 million tons. But based on UP standards, like if they can get a unit train in, they have a facility, one facility that does a unit train a day. So based on that, we said, okay, if 1 million tons represents 2 to 4 unit trains a week, then you could potentially have another 4 to 6 unit trains, which would then be that same 2-5 period.
2.5 million.
Yeah, so roughly we calculated that if you used the site 100%, everything worked out great, you could get maybe 2.5 million tons of sand, 2.5 to 3 million tons of sand off that site. Is that our plan? No, our plan is, we have a facility designed to do somewhere between 800 and 1.2 million tons a year. That's where we're going. So we anticipate, our facility, depending on how the permitting process works out, being able to provide, whatever it provides is what we will then ship to Texas and put through our dryers. If you're not going to say that we don't have to make up sand, or we don't buy some sand from somebody else, we may do that, but it will not be we're just going to start taking on all the sand. We have already taken our facilities, our dryers can handle between 1 million and 1.2 million tons per year.
But you could ship my sand to my dryers, North Dakota.
If the committee allowed that, I think that would be something we'd probably have to come back to you for and say, hey, we'd like to increase this by 2-fold. That would create some logistical problems for us. But the thing to remember about that too is the industry's not set up for this. This is an outside the box model. Most of the guys, they have their wet plants. Maybe they truck it a little distance to a dryer and they dry it and they reel out dried sand. Most companies don't have the two separated. In our case, we have a wet plant in Wisconsin. We truck it to a transload facility. We transload it into a rail car, and then we rail it, thousands of miles to a dryer. Most companies don't just say we're just going to go put in a dry plant, wherever, and ship wet sand to it. Just unless they control their own deposit, have their own sand, somewhere somehow. That's a lot of risk to take on a $35–40 million facility. Just to say, yeah, we're going to bet that we're going to be able to go get wet sand somewhere. in and meet the specs, not have any issues, that's a lot of risk. To my knowledge, there are a few very, very small guys that do that have like dryers that are maybe like 50 ton an hour. But none of the larger players have any type of capacity of what we're talking about, which is putting in a large wet plant, in Wisconsin, in a dryer, South Texas, rest of Texas, South Texas.
Thank you.
Perfect. Kind of last but not least, we, I guess it's one other thing I would say. With us asking for 24 hours, 7 days a week, we would like to cite important initial rules, which are stronger than OSHA rules. Just from the standpoint of having a site, all of the lighting would be downcast, but it would be lit according to the standards. We would use white noise backup alarms. We would have to have potentially one motor on site just to move junk sand or whatever else things need to be cleaned up. So we would do that. Based on that, this is a combined between kind of the mine location and the translate facility. But as you can see, this does not include any of the trucking. So the truck drivers, the trucking revenue, and all that would be separate. Just from the, from this standpoint here, you look like 3 clerks, primary job, logs of trucks coming in, gets their weigh tickets, combines those to make sure that sand coming into the site and sand leaving the site are about the same. Works with UP, scheduling, all that good stuff. Then you have your loader, rail crew, you have some sort of plant manager, and obviously some managers here. With us layering in the trucking, you also have some management for the trucking, the truck drivers and the maintenance crew, so you're adding additional dollars. The way that we look at this is we want to move roughly 1 million tons a year. Our cost, our raw cost, that's after we pay the royalty, pay all the mining costs, the washing costs, the trucking costs, the transloading costs, and all the costs associated with the transloading facility. Our cost per ton is roughly $25 per ton. So what that means is 1 million tons a year, $25 a ton is roughly $25 million now. There's all sorts of studies, and you can manipulate the data any way you want. At the end of the day, that's what we're spending through whether we pay our own people, whether we hire outside maintenance crews to help us, whether we pay the local gas station, whether we pay the utility company, the diesel provider, whomever that we pay. That's roughly the all-in cost of what the 2 facilities. We think that's a fairly significant number, and we think the direct payroll is, probably in the 5 million-ish, 5.5 with the truck. So that's a considerable amount of dollar infusion year after year into local economies. It's been brought up that we're going to bring in all these people from Texas and this, that, and the other. I can tell you we're not going to do that. A, it's too expensive.
You guys couldn't stand the cold.
There you go. There you go. I mean, we will have a few guys up here that are going to be more of a consulting, training type role. Make sure that we can train our guys to understand, our local guys here, what we expect, from the trucking side. What do we expect? How do these transload facilities operate? How to replace different components of them? How to understand how they operate? If it is if something is messing up, why is it messing up from other experience? And then obviously, and most importantly, is from the standpoint of our hydrosides, making sure that we get the right product coming out, and making sure that the right product is on the rail cars, so that we're not railing a lot of waste or product that we can't use. So from that standpoint, I can see maybe 5 guys, 6 guys. In the beginning, it might be a few more, but it'll dwindle down probably to 2 or 3 or 4 guys. That's just honest truth. We've done the same thing in South Texas. Put a facility down there. We took in about 8 guys from our facility in Crescent, took them down there, trained them up. We have 2 guys there.
Supervisor Quinn has a question.
I'm not sure, Mr. Sikes, was that chart included in our materials?
Yeah, it's in this package.
And we could update it with it. You have to see up here, this is, you should probably update it. This is created prior to owning the trucking side as well. So there's mention of it up here of approximately 30 to 40 truck drivers in addition to the, what we have is 53 employees. So you're at 100 to 100, 110 something there.
If you go back to the trucking, you asked about the hours. We specifically said 8 p.m. on Saturday to 5 a.m. on Monday because under the new regulations that are coming out, every driver has that 36-hour reset every single week. Plus they got overtime and they special rules and other people workings. But we do not consider this. I don't think the state of Wisconsin would consider this part of that oil fill exemption. I mean, oil fill exemption, if you look at the definition, is primarily meant for, two location, staging times, loading times. Again, it's normal trucking. You would take a container, a Connex down the road. I mean, it's the same type of rules and regulations. So based on that, every driver gets a 36-hour window. We feel like every week is the best. Saturday 8 p.m. to Monday at 5 a.m. Would be most ideal. Or seems to be most ideal is in public comments and whatnot. And then during school, realizing that school is going to come this way for part of the time, not the whole time. So we got the summer. It was asked, hey, will you work with us on days that were special days? Absolutely. I mean, we're here to be a good corporate citizen. And, our employees are going to want the same days off because their kids are going to be off. They're going to want to, do the same, hopefully participate in the same events and whatnot. So we do want to be good corporate citizens. Allow our guys to think you guys do.
Supervisor Quinn.
With regard to economic impacts, have you calculated the property tax benefits or?
So this is getting a little interesting because the way I understand Wisconsin law, which don't hold me to this, but my understanding is that you guys have a set tax base. My understanding that the tax base is somewhere around 60 million for the town of Menominee. I think it's around 60. I'm not sure. Maybe that's second quarter. But either way, we put in a facility that's worth, let's say, $12 million. Yeah, if we take up that $12 million, it'll have a tax impact. It won't increase your tax base, but it'll lower the burden on everybody else. But it's minuscule what that burden will be. From a tax standpoint, I don't see a whole lot, and that I don't. It's just part of the way it worked out.
I think in addition to that, but whatever the tax rule is, the tax law is, will be subject to it, and no problem.
I asked directly, how much is this plant going to be valued at, do you believe? Are you going to spend $12 million out there?
In the town of Menominee, this facility here, the cost is $12 million.
Does that include the UP stuff?
So what that includes is the switches, the rail infrastructure, the upgrade to this road here, and the tunnel infrastructure, the road infrastructure, the lights. Does not include any rail cars. Does not include any trucks. Trucks will be another 3 to 5. How we lease. This facility, this facility here, is roughly $12 million.
My recollection is that, and I could be wrong, that railroad-owned property is not subject to ad valorem taxes. I believe that's correct. They pay something like an in lieu. And the road, of course, wouldn't have anything to do with anything. It would just be nor with the cars, nor with the trucks. So it would be the internal part.
This is just a point of clarification. The site won't be owned by the UP. It'll be owned by which there's a big difference, because you're right. If it's owned by the UP, if the UP came in and said, we're gonna buy this, we're gonna set this up, then, you know, obviously it would fall under jurisdiction. Two, they would pay tax. They would get the now basically federal property. That's the way it's considered.
Supervisor Bjork, would there be any personal property tax on railroad cars if they're sitting there for like, you know, quite a bit of time? A lot of townships will get money from personal property. Would that be considered personal property?
Honestly, I don't even know. I mean, this is above.
No, I don't think anything like that is personal property is taxed in Wisconsin anymore, including trucks. We don't have a personal property tax.
We did address these issues with town. One of the things that, you know, knowing that this should be fairly difficult, we agreed to pay a fee on a per rail car basis, the rail cars that actually got shipped to the site, to help cover cost of, you know, maintaining road, or that they want to do some of their own air monitoring, you know, so that some of that will cover the cost, some of that we reimburse them for. We did agree to fairly, my understanding is a very aggressive development agreement with the town, which I hope you guys have it.
Mr. Bammer gave it to us and our staff did too.
Anything else?
Thank you, guys.
Any questions of staff? Hearing none. Cleo, do you have anything to add? Thank you, by the way.
Thank you.
No, I do not, other than what you have in your packets and then as I presented this morning.
Okay, then to proceed for the morning and possibly into the afternoon, I think we're going to take a 10-minute break, a recess. We'll come back and then we will begin. I will open up for public comments and ask people to speak, and I'll give some guidelines at that point. But in any case, let's take a 10-minute recess at this point.